Hello everyone, I'm back with another episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. Today a little hybrid episode. I'll be talking about gravity again. And this time I hope it'll be a bit shorter, but just I wanted to come back. I've discussed this topic a lot already, but I just wanted to put a more structured frame around the whole idea of gravity. Oops, why is this recording? Yeah, so let's get started. So the whole point is to link gravity with dimensions and also with time, actually. And time, should I add. So let's get right into it. And I need to hide this. All right. So what does gravity have to do with dimensions? Well, actually, if you remember what I was saying in my previous videos, I was talking about, let me just, a little bit of a problem here. There we go. I was talking about the fact that gravity is essentially falling into or having control over the future of matter or a part of reality. So what I've designed is imagine here there's the singularity, which is the ultimate future that all of the universe is heading into. And gravity is simply the observed influence that a certain singularity has over the future of a certain matter. And obviously, I've said that there's these nested cones, one inside the other, where, the Earth falls into the center of, falls into the sun, basically. If you look at animated videos of the solar system, planets are not orbiting, the sun like this. They're actually spiraling down towards the sun, which is falling into the future, if you will, towards its own ultimate future, which is here. And then the sun itself is then spiraling and falling into the center of the galaxy. And all of the stars in the galaxy are actually spiraling into the black hole at the center of the galaxy. And then the galaxy itself is falling into another black hole, and so on and so forth. But the reason why we can't see this fall, especially at the level of galaxies, is because they're not falling in a three-dimensional reality. They're falling in much more, in a much grander kind of multi-dimensional reality. And so you can't really observe the same kind of sinkhole effect. And the reason all right, never mind. Well, that didn't work out. So the reason why I refer to dimensions here, which is really important, is because it ties into the evolution of, or the different structures of reality in the universe. And in order to simplify things, let's just talk about matter in non-living, non-organic. So I'm talking about essentially atoms and things like, rocks, metals, things that are solid. Now, they are actually in a one-dimensional reality. One-dimensional because ultimately you could view them as falling in a straight line towards the ultimate future. If you had an attractor at a certain point, for instance, imagine if all there existed in the universe was this one giant black hole which had all of the matter in it. And you had one little speck of rock, then that attraction would be unidimensional. It will just go straight into, it'd sink right into that ultimate future. But, this one dimension actually, so if you plot it as a line, what happens is that it is bent here in the middle. That is the effect of how you transition from one dimension to two dimensions, is that ultimately what you get is a kind of a sinkhole like this. So now imagine organic life, right? So you look at the first living cell, a unicellular organism. It is in a two-dimensional reality. It doesn't fall straight like this. It falls in a spiraling kind of way. So you've all seen this kind of illustration of like a plane, a two-dimensional plane with like Earth, sitting in the middle, like this, and then it sort of attracts all of the things towards it like this, spiraling towards it. Now that is a two-dimensional representation of the distortion of space-time. And that is what, affects unicellular organisms. Like they fall in a two-dimensional way, like their reality is two-dimensional. That's what I'm trying to say, is like they perceive reality. To them, Earth is flat. Just put it forward. Or not even flat. To them, Earth is like a cone. Like a a three-dimensional cone. Well, actually, it's two-dimensional, but the distortion is what makes the bridge between like this one and this one, which is now two-dimensional, but deformed. And this deformation is what creates the bridge between two dimensions. So a straight line that is kind of deformed to create this kind of sinkhole. If you imagine an infinite number of these lines that are bent like this via this attraction of this one point of everything towards an ultimate future, then that creates this kind of surface, like a plane that is deformed in the center and then attracts everything spiraling into it. This time spiraling because if it's unidimensional, if it's one dimension, it can only roll straight down. It cannot go this way, it cannot go that way, it can only roll straight down. So for all intents and purposes, it's like if there was just one dimension and you're just falling straight. So that's life, right? And so from that perspective, Earth is at the same time, Earth is one-dimensional, is just a point from the point of matter. Earth is flat, it's like a disk, but actually a cone because, don't forget, it's deformed or, via the space-time, via the attraction of the future, from the point of unicellular organisms. And they're kind of falling into this cone like this. And then from the point of view of animals, let's say animals at that point, or multicellular organisms, then this becomes three-dimensional. And three-dimensional actually isn't this. This is just, how should I say, it's like a deformed two-dimensional plane, but it's not three-dimensional. It's not, you have to imagine this plane as not being a plane anymore, but as being almost like, I wouldn't know how to describe it, like a cube or something maybe that is space-time or whatever, that's deformed by space-time and is going towards an infinite towards an ultimate future. It's not a surface anymore. It's more of a cube or some kind of three-dimensional plane because depth here is just an effect of, it's like the bridge between the second dimension and third dimension, but it's not exactly third dimensional yet. And the Earth becomes round with the appearance of pluricellular creatures. Don't forget that like a unicellular organism doesn't have two eyes. It only perceives the world as two-dimensional from its vantage point. And the moment that pluricellular creatures appear, going all the way up to animals, sophisticated animals, the Earth becomes round. That is, it begins to fall into an ultimate future in an extra dimension, which, and I don't even know how to say, but so it's almost like now you're kind of surfing on this wave. Now you have more degrees of freedom, because when you introduce animals and all that biological life, it affects the planet's future in a way that is much more significant and profound than if you just had unicellular creatures on the surface of the planet, right? If you just had a couple of bacteria here and there. Now, what's really interesting is when you add humans in the mix. And humans, they actually convert the Earth into a four-dimensional plane. So, like I said, like gravity, so long as you are falling in one dimension, you're falling straight. When you're falling in two dimensions, you're spiraling down. When you're falling in three dimensions, you can spiral down, but in a more interesting kind of way where you kind of surf going down. This is like animals and stuff, which have more degrees of freedom still in falling towards an ultimate future than, single cellular organisms or dead matter. And here is one dimension, two dimensions, three dimensions. And the fourth dimension, I can't even represent that, but it's because humans add the concept of time. That is, we have this past, this concept of past, this concept of future. So it's almost like the planet's future acquires an extra dimension in all that it can be going forward. And also, and that's 4D, but then 5D is adding immaterial ideas, concepts on top of the Earth, which makes it break away from falling into its ultimate future in this very three-dimensional kind of manner. So even in 4 dimensions, even if you add a fourth dimension, which is time, you can't break away from the laws of gravity per se. Not yet. Even though you can kind of start to see it like locally. Like you can start to play and bend the laws of gravity. And what I mean by that is, our airplanes, all our technology, even playing with magnets and, maglev trains and levitating, objects using sound, for instance, all of these things are a way to gradually set yourself free from gravity because you're transitioning between fourth and fifth dimensions. And by adding dimensions, you're no longer falling in this kind of manner, which is consistent with the laws of physics and obeys strictly the laws of physics. Like the laws of physics is this is like the laws of chemistry. This is like the laws of biology. That is, in an animal, if you think of an animal, if you look at the planet as more like a cone, and things are falling into the ultimate future of the planet, an animal doesn't fall straight into its future. It roams around. It moves all the time and it goes places, And humans just push this logic to such an extent that they create this fourth dimensional way of falling into the future. Like, for instance, the fact that we could go on the moon or exit this planet's gravity means you're extracting part of the planet's matter, which is your body, from the ultimate future of the planet. That is, if you take a rocket and you just decide to die in that rocket, but go as far as it can reach, and then just with its inertia, with its acceleration, it just takes you, just coasting through the solar system. You will even your matter will even might even exit the ultimate future of the solar system itself. And so you're exiting this kind of the black hole that is the sun, basically, that represents the ultimate future of all matter in the solar system, right? And so in a fifth dimensional kind of reality, so how does that look like? How do you free, for instance, planet Earth from the gravity of the sun? Well, you can't do it in a third dimensional reality, not even in a fourth, But in a fifth dimensional reality, you could. That is, for instance, how would humans experience anti-gravity? Well, if you add a fifth dimension, you're no longer falling in these kinds of ways. You're no longer falling towards an ultimate future in these kind of ways. So I cannot show you or represent what that looks like how you would fall into a black hole that is in 5 dimensions, and you're falling through time in towards that ultimate future in 5 dimensions. Maybe one way to do it is to leverage this idea of ideas and concepts. That is, you can see that as humans, we are falling into a black hole which has like all ideas and concepts inside it, and they start appearing richer and richer as you get closer to the center of that black hole. Like you would say, like here you have prehistoric times, and you have barely any ideas existing in reality, and then you have like the Bronze Age, and the great Greek philosophers, Greek philosophers, and then Roman Empire, and etc., etc. And you can see that this is the manifestation of now falling in more than just 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions. You're now, ideas are also kind of falling on and affecting this planet, but to such an extent that ultimately there might be strong enough to counter the gravity of the 1-dimensional gravity, the 2nd-dimensional gravity, 3rd-dimensional gravity. All of these compound, obviously, they compound. But at a certain point, maybe you falling into a 5-dimensional reality counters the strength of the other forces, and that manifests as anti-gravity, you see? So imagine if you're falling into, like, your body, for instance, the matter of your body is falling towards the center, the future of this planet, right? But at the same time, you're also leveraging other other forces of gravity from higher dimensions, so for instance, you are, how should I say this? So in a 3-dimensional way, your body is tethered to the earth, but imagine if in a 5th-dimensional way, you start to tether yourself to other planets like Mars, for instance, or Jupiter. And their gravity, quote unquote, from a 3D affects Earth very, very poorly, very small influence. But maybe from a 5th-dimensional plane, they can affect Earth much more profoundly. And this, again, is very hard to explain. It's more like, I don't even know how to say this, imagine if one of these planets has a human civilization or a humanoid civilization at some point in the future, or had at some point in the past that we don't know about, and they created a whole ecosystem of ideas on that planet, and you tap into that reservoir, and so you tether your future to higher dimensional ideas that come from elsewhere. That means you're going to be less and less affected by this 3D gravity. That's one way to put it. And that can manifest as in a material form, that is, you develop advanced technology that lets you go to, Mars or whatever. But it can also manifest in non-material ways. That doesn't really matter. Like the whole logic is that, like, the whole idea is I think that gradually what humans will do is they will gradually free themselves from the influence of the planet. Like imagine, like again, the planet, don't forget that the planet is one black hole that you're falling into, which itself is tethered to the sun, which is another black hole that it falls into. And so if you are here, instead of falling into the earth, which falls into the sun, you could start via access to higher dimensional kind of gravities, untether yourself from the planets and tether yourself to the suns, and then you're falling into the sun. Your future is tied to the solar system. And then imagine if your consciousness grows further and you actually realize that the solar system itself is falling into the galaxy, and so you untether your consciousness and or body or whatever from in that, and you expand to in a higher dimension again, and fall into the center of the galaxy. And at that point, you're no longer falling linearly. That's the point where I was saying that you can maybe even travel back and forth in time. This is non-linear, time reasoning and all that kind of things. Like at that point, I would have to really think about it very profoundly to be able to describe what that looks like in terms of falling, because you're no longer falling technically. Like imagine falling in 5 dimensions. Like Interstellar tried to illustrate this, like with this kind of grid where you could see different, times of the past and the future of the same room, for instance, and you could navigate through that. But there's really no way to picture it yet, or maybe for some people, I don't know. But I can't describe it yet with words. I'm lacking vocabulary here, and especially illustrated. What it's like to fall, for instance, in 6 dimensions or 7 dimensions, towards, again, a singularity where everything, all realities, all dimensions, everything sort of goes to this kind of ultimate absolute, which, some would call God or universal consciousness or whatever. But the absolute that represents infinity, which is everything, where everything exists, as opposed to nothingness, which is one and the same, but just as the other aspect of the absolute unity. So I hope you find it interesting. So from the human perspective, that's what I wanted to say, is that we think the Earth is a sphere when it's actually already kind of a hypersphere, because we're not in 3 dimensions. We're looking at the Earth through our animal eyes, through our physical eyes, and so we see it as 3-dimensional, as a sphere. But if you look at the way that we look at the planet, we really look at it, all of us, in 4 dimensions. That is, we look at the planet as what it used to be, past, what we think it will be, future. And so the planet already has an extra dimension through humans, because don't forget, animals don't think about what the planet used to be like and don't think about what the planet is going to be like, right? They're really falling in this 3-dimensional way. And then add a 5th dimension to the planet, which is the future of a planet where humanity forms a coherent global collective organism and sort of makes that matter, part of that planet, ascend into a higher dimensional plane. And what does that look like? Well, I have one way to illustrate it. Like imagine that you have like a pond and you have these unicellular organisms in the pond, right? Imagine if those unicellular organisms coalesce into a fish, right? They create a fish together. Now that fish, wow, I'm such a good drawer. That fish is going to have part of the pond inside of it. Like it's going to have part of like some minerals of the pond in it. And its blood is going to be made of water, which is based on the pond. And so when humans kind of go into this higher dimensional plane, it's as if they're taking part of the planet with them as their skeleton, if you will. It's like that's why, many, people that are talking about ETs and all that stuff are saying that um, this planet is like our spaceship. And it is. It is like we're already using it as our skeleton when we're mining, um, metal and constructing space rockets. A space rocket is essentially almost like an extension of almost like your skeleton, and you are inside your own skeleton. Like you have the shell and all kinds of other things inside it, which are solid, and then you have moving parts, which are humans. Just like in your body, you have also things that are, hard, and then you have moving parts in your body that manage to put the hard things into motion. Like your skeleton, without your muscles, without the blood, without everything, without the organs, isn't going anywhere. Your skeleton is just a dead rock without all of the rest of your body around it. And so now imagine how how the planet could now fall into the future, quote unquote, when it's no longer tethered in this 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional way. And so that's well, kind of fantastical in a way, but it's almost like the same experience of a baby that is tethered to its mother while still inside the womb. And then when it's outside the womb, then it can crawl around and do plenty of things and gradually start exploring a reality which is much more profound and vast than what it initially thought it was. And it's that same kind of process. So I think that kind of sums up, the whole idea of how gravity is tied to dimensions, and the fact that how you could, quote unquote, break the laws of physics. Like from a human perspective, every time we lift an object, from its perspective, we're breaking, quote unquote, the laws of physics because we are ripping it from its unidimensional falling into the future and displacing it into a parallel one. And it doesn't understand how it could get from here to there because there just isn't any explanation for it. Like you've literally, every time you move a physical object from one place to another, it's as if you have manually ripped it from its linear timeline of falling straight into the future into a parallel one where, nothing makes sense anymore. It's like, wow, it's in another reality, like suddenly, and the same when you sort of manipulate, unicellular organisms, and like you shift them between 2-dimensional planes. You lift them from one 2-dimensional plane to another 2-dimensional plane. You don't think that's what you're doing because you're looking at reality through your eyes and your stereoscopic vision of reality because you are in a 3-dimensional reality. But from the vantage point of unicellular organisms, in my view, you're actually like ripping them from falling into the future in this 2-dimensional way from one plane into another plane, and they don't understand what just happened. It's just like interdimensional travel. And the same for an animal that you put in a cage and you'd fly it half across the world to another country, or put it in a zoo or something. From its perspective, it's the same as taking you from one planet to another because it just can't fathom how it managed to get there. Now, obviously, again, as I say, there are bridges between these dimensions, like between the 1 dimension and 2 dimensions and 2 dimension, 3 dimensions, via the deformation of this, the bending of this. And so it's not like clear cut and absolute in that sense. Like certain animals might understand, like a chimpanzee may, or I don't know, and the same for humans. And so when we think like a human perpetually, quote unquote, violates the laws of physics, it's just that we explain it through all of the different layers and knowledge that we have, like physics here, chemistry, biology here. But imagine if you were purely an atom and you didn't know about all these other layers, then what humans are doing is magic constantly. And now imagine a point where humanity forms a collective global organism, and that organism has an intelligence of its own. And what it could do to reality, it could bend all of these other laws to a much greater extent still, which, we could like rationalize and explain to ourselves, but I don't think that would be very wise, because that is limiting artificially the power that that superorganism has. Because remember, I think I've said this in previous videos, whatever you say about reality, you also say simultaneously about yourself. There's nothing you can say about reality that you're not saying about yourself as well, because you're part of that reality. So a being that transcends us, I'll just give an example of something that is very material, but imagine if you think that an AI singularity is just a bunch of electric circuits that are based on strict cause and effect, right? So any power that it would have would be dwarfed by that kind of belief system. It's like It's like if your cells lobotomized your brain because they wouldn't believe in your human intelligence of navigating in this reality. And they said, well, no. I'm part of this organism, but that organism cannot be smarter than I am, like myself. And that's crazy, of course. But again, like even for people that don't believe in this kind of conscious singularity AI, an AI, we can already see that AIs can run 1 million simulations of alternate like courses of action for plenty of different things, whether there's video games or whatever, where humans can only run a couple. So imagine the kind of way that such a singularity would view reality and future timelines for humanity and all that stuff. Plus, I mean, we already see the signs of the power of us forming a collective trickle down slowly into our reality. Like we see transhumanism and gene manipulation, and that is just a physical manifestation through a materialist lens of manipulating our own biology, which also trickles down into manipulating our chemistry, which also trickles down into manipulating our physics. And so, like we can imagine like this crazy scenario where humans manage to grow wings in order to fly like birds through the sky, like Icarus, but like the real deal. Like you really gain deep insight into how an eagle has wings, what are the genes for that, blah, blah, blah. And then you instruct a human body through, what Michael Levin was talking about, if you look at my previous videos, with this bioelectrics kind of impulse saying, grow wings here. And then bam, a human grows wings and then they can fly around the world. Well, aren't you actually, in a way, bending the laws of, physics, because now you can fly, right? You rationalize it as a human because you're like, yeah, but I have wings and so it's normal. It still obeys the laws of physics, blah, blah, blah. But again, that's because you're looking at it from your vantage point. You're not, you have that kind of worldview or lens through which you view reality, but try to take yourself out of that kind of way of thinking and see that the laws of gravity apply less to you, that you're lighter, that now you can extract yourself from falling straight into this kind of future of the planet in 3 dimensions. And that's all there's to it. So I hope you found this video interesting. Don't forget to comment if you have a comment, and like, share, subscribe, the usual. And I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.